Gandhara. But his interests are wide, and today he's going to prove that by talking to us about Eratokritos, dangerous dreams and dubious visions in Gonaros' Eratokritos.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the organizers for accepting the proposal. It's a great honor presenting such a conference. Moreover, to have Professor Holton chairing the panel, and it's scary as well, but let's not focus on that part now. Just another thing before proceeding, I've changed a bit the abstract due to the time length, but if you have any questions for something that I have not included in the presentation, it's in the abstract, please feel free to ask whatever you feel like. So Alexander Empirikos, in his 1960 essay on Eratokritos, writes that the poet of the Romance, il a suggéré un monde de rêve. This monde de rêve, the dream world of the famous Cretan romance by Vincenzo Gonaros, will be the main focus of my paper. More specifically, the aim of my presentation is to re-examine the dreams incorporated in the narrative and shed light on their interconnections, but also in their position in the narrative of the romance. In doing so, I am, of course, taking into consideration the existing bibliography on the issue, which, in the case of Charydimos' dream, is the work of David Holton, whose great contribution in the field of modern Greek studies, and more specifically in the studies of the Romans under examination we honor today, and also an article by Stamatia Laonzi, whose presentation in a Skype version preceded mine in a magical way. Now, more studies have appeared on Arethusa's dream, and specifically we have parts in books and articles by Holton again, by Baker and Philippidis, by Massimo Berri, and by Michalis Vasithiotakis. The connections of these two dreams have mainly been studied by Holton. I feel obliged to state from the beginning that due to the limited time and space I have for this presentation, I will not repeat or extensively discuss the findings of these articles unless they are necessary for the argument that I'm trying to build today. Having said that, and with no further ado, let us start by analyzing the relevant extracts from the text. Firstly, we have Charydimos' own bucolic episode as an encased narrative in the Romance, which roughly unfolds between the lines 591 and 752. I tend to agree with Holton's 1991 remark on this, and not with Zimbone in his latest remark, since the previous lines, 581 to 590, could be seen, and I believe should be seen, as part of the narrative of Gyostra and the introduction of the protagonists to the audience. It has also been convincingly argued that the source of this episode is a famous Ovidian myth of Cephalus and Procris, but as it was transmitted in an Italian translation adaptation, most probably of the one made by Della Aguilara, while more recently Holton in 2012 and Paffiti in 2014 proved, I believe, a connection between the bucolic episode and the bucolic text of Voskopoulas. It is interesting, though, that the inclusion of the dream in Gonaros' narrative consists of a deviation from the original myth of Cephalus and Procris, but also from the translations and adaptations that have been connected with the text. Another interesting fact about the function of the dream in Gonaros' story is that, in contrast to the passive dream in Voskopoula, Charydimos' dream has an active function, since it seems to be the reason why the tragic hero kills his spouse. The actual dream unfolds in only 4 lines and goes as follows. Και εκεί όπου εκοιμότανε ο νιώτερος, του φάνει πως ήρθαν πόδια λιονταριού και την καρδιά του πιάνει. Και τότε σε γρικήθηκε κρυός πια παρά το χιόνι και φαίνετό του την καρδιά πως του τη ξεριζώνει. Before proceeding to the analysis of the dream, I believe it is necessary to examine how the dream is introduced and what its topography is. The couple is in a locus Amoenus on Mount Ida. You can see the relevant extract. But there is something different in this bucolic environment, something like a temptation which evokes the idea of Adam and Eve and the snake, an argument to which I will come back to later, a very pretty Voskopoula. Και από όλους εκείνους που ήσαν εκεί κατοικημένοι, μια βοσκοπούλα ευρίσκονταν ομορφοκαμωμένη. Even though the narrator instantly tries to convince us that Charydimos was not interested in the young and beautiful lady, ομορφοκαμωμένη, his spouse feels threatened by her presence there, in an environment that, as Paffiti has argued, could be seen as more perfidied for her, for the Voskopoula, rather than the wife, who starts having doubts and wants to test her husband's love. Here, the introduction to the dream begins, but it is constantly interrupted either by the narrator's comments or by the actions of Charydimos' spouse. We should keep in mind three elements from the above extract, which are necessary for the development of the story. First, the reference to hypnogliki, sweet sleep, the fact that the friends are not there to interfere with the story, and the reference to evastato doxari. He was still holding his bow. From this point onwards, we seem to have two parallel actions. On the one hand, we have Charydimos, who is trying to sleep under the tree, and on the other hand, the ordeal that the woman is planning for her husband. If we eliminate the second action of what the spouse is doing, the dream goes as follows. The contrast between the introductory part and the actual dream is very obvious, even though all the elements in the story are leading towards a good dream, sweet sleep, sweetness of the landscape, the hero actually sees a nightmare. What could be the explanation of this? We only have two elements. First, the fact that he is sleeping with his weapon and consequently dreaming of an aggressive episode. And second, the metaphysical, in a way, notion of his wife's jealousy. Both references, doxari and the jealousy, could be associated, and in my opinion should be associated with the god of love. As also Laozi has argued, the only two people holding an arrow in the whole romance are the god of love and Charydimos. Could this be a signal that Charydimos' dream is a message from the god of love? Before arguing more on the subject, we should examine Charydimos' connection with the god of love. As we are informed by the narrator, Charydimos never wanted to get married, and therefore he was resistant towards the power of love until he saw this young woman, who we've seen before, who eventually became his spouse. Ελέγαν του να παντρευτεί δεν ήθελε ποτέ του και τη ζωή της η μοναξιάς αγάπα κύρεσέ του. Μασάνω που πολλές φορές αυτήν οι περισσάροι κομπώνονται και πιάνονται στο δίχτυ σαν το ψάρι, περνώντας μια ταχτερινή and so on. And then, after that, πάρα αυτά η γνώμη του ήλαξε και την βουλή του την πρώτην ήρυξε και σκλαβώθηκαν η τρυφερή του νιώτη. Interestingly, the process of falling in love in his case is described with the following lines. Και το εφανίστη ως την εδίκαισα αιτιάν του δόκα και είχε τον πόθο στο φωνή τον έρωτα στην κόκα. The verb efanisti is synonymous with the word tufani, which introduces a dream, connecting in a way these two verses and may also point to a vision of Eros shooting him with an arrow, whereas the word saitian, in his case, is enriched with the presence of passion and love. Therefore, when he falls in love, it is as if he felt an arrow wounding him, while afterwards he goes to sleep putting his bow next to him, and when he wakes up from the nightmare, one of the first things he does is take his bow again. Τρομάμενος εξύπνησε, με φόβον εσηκώθη και το δοξάρι παρευθύς έπιασεν εις τη χέρα, with which he eventually kills his spouse by throwing her a saitιά, an arrow. Και τη σαιτιά εκόκιασε ζημιό την ώρα εκείνη και βρίσκει την σαιτιά στα μαρμαρένια στήθη. The narrator decides to use the verb ekokιασε, as Stamatia Laozi argues, which of course brings to mind the word koka in the previous extract, the same word that included the god of love. Moreover, the arrow manages to find his spouse στα μαρμαρένια στήθη, which brings to mind the archetypical image of god Eros, who throws bows into the chest of people. An image which is also described by Aretusa. Let's see, for example, in Eρωτόκριτος' book C, κατέχιστο πως την καρδιάν ο έρωτας ζωξεύει. Therefore, coming back to my initial argument, could this dream be seen as a reverse image of the ordeals of the god of love testing the two lovers? Could this be, after all, the job of Topivoulo Kopeli? But what have the lovers done in order to cause the rage of the Eros of the Punisher? Recapitulating, Charydimos was defying him till he becomes much older, while the spouse, even though is given a husband who is nobler and richer than her, still fails to pass the ordeal of the Voskopoula, and tries to use her own ways to see whether Charydimos' love for her is true, a fact which in this case undermines the power of the god of love. This is not the only time that this happens in Eρωτόκριτος, the presence of Eros the Punisher, since as Baker has convincingly argued, a similar situation happens in the case of the fight between Eρωτόκριτος and Kypridimos, with the former representing the god of love himself in defeating Kypridimos, who arrogantly defies the god of love. In order to support this, let me use a different text from the 15th century, Hypnerotomachia Polyphili. which indicatively in its title manages to sum up three important elements of this episode: Hypnos, sleep, Erotas, love, and Machik, fight. When the protagonist of the story, Polyphilo, finally falls asleep after a sleepless night, lamenting the loss of his beloved Polia, he initially finds himself in the dark forest. Terrified by what might happen to him, he recalls the fate of Charydimos. As you can see, like Charydimos. Who is this Charydimos that the protagonist is referring to? And why is he cited here? To the extent of my knowledge, there is no research regarding such a version of Charydimos' story, and there is no time, of course, to focus on this now, but it is something I plan on doing later. But what is of interest here is the reference to a Charydimos who is being attacked by a wild animal. The answer for this, I believe, is found in Book 2 of the Hypnerotomachia Polyphili, in the vision of Polia, which is represented in these two images. This is image number 1, and this is image number 2. Both images show the Punisher Eros, who uses 4 types of animals to attack those who defy him: an eagle, a lion, a wolf, and a grypas. I would also like to add something else. As we can see the god Eros holding his sword. That's present in Herodotus as well. That image of Eros holding his sword is present in the Romans. In support of this, I would like to use... Having this in mind, and the above arguments about the god of love, perhaps it would not be too speculative to support that the dream that Charydimos sees is not merely a nightmare, but rather a prophetic dream. In support of this, I would like to use a line from the beginning of the episode. Έρωτας ήταν η αρχή, το τέλος πάλι εγίνη. And then a line from the end of the episode. Εδά επρόβαλε Συγκρίτης το λιοντάρι. Love was the beginning, and then it became the end again. This could lead us to another interpretation. This episode, the nightmare, is reversing the implied vision that made Charydimos to fall in love. An actual event, which is concluded with an implied vision, Eros shooting the arrow, is replaced by an oniric event, which is concluded by an actual event. The same action that Eros performs towards a positive outcome is performed by Charydimos but leads to a negative outcome. Eros, as Punisher, uses his arrow to subdue his opponents to his will, making them lovers. Charydimos, perhaps, becomes like a Punisher in Eros' commands, and the lines between the real and the fictional arrows become blurred. This is perhaps why the hero of the story becomes identified with the animal that he dreamt about and which almost took his heart away. Συγκρίτης το λιοντάρι. Read as such, then, maybe the dream is not about understanding the past of the hero, but on the contrary, is used as an indicator about his future, a future that will turn him into a lion and, of course, into a constant reminder of the power of love. Even though there are much more to be said about this dream, let us now turn to the dream of Arethusa. Arethusa's dream is much more linked to the overall narrative of the text. As Baker and Philippides have showed, the references to the process of initiation in love, with imagery taken from the sea, are present in all parts of the Romance. Actually, I would argue that there is a climactic connection between the heroine's process of initiation, her psychological state, and the imagery of the water. This is in accordance to the whole process of love between the couple, which happens agali, in contrast to the parafta that we've seen in Charydimos' story, and I believe forms a cyclical narrative around which the love story is structured. Another important aspect of this is that, with the exception of the last part of the dream of Arethusa, the imagery of the water is only used when the two lovers are not together, and therefore fighting with or submitting to Pothos, in contrast to the imagery of the plants, which is also present in their famous scene of Apostoletismos. My analysis of the dream will be based around 2 main points. Instead of focusing on the dream itself, trying to read it from within, I will attempt a brief reading on the outside of its narrative by connecting it to other parts of the Romance, which I believe could help us to unlock its importance. Let us start by comparing the dream with what precedes it in the narration. In Book A, we find the first subtle reference to Arethusa seeing maybe joyful dreams of Herodotus in the first process of falling in love with him. Και πώς είναι μπορετό να βγω από τα πάθη που με, αν είναι πάντα με τα με, ξύπνου κι όντε κοιμούμαι. Interestingly, this first indirect reference of her dreaming is followed by the following imagery. Παιχνίδι μας εφαίνεται το δούμε φουσκωμένοι, από μακρά τη θάλασσα και άγρα και θυμωμένοι. And so on. Obviously, the sea is a metaphor for love, and of fiction at the same time. The young Arethusa, maturely enough for her age, claims that when we see the wild sea from afar, we view it as a game, but the only person that can help us is someone that has gone through this before. Meaning that only if you experience the feeling, you understand its suffering, its dangers, and its bitter sweetness. The only verbal allusions to the dream are the words harakia, thola, and fenete. The last part of the stanza offers a possible definition for the person that saves Arethusa in her own dream. If the only person that could help you is one that has been through it, then could Rotokritos be the person, this person, as Baker and Philippides have argued? They base their argument on the following passage. The connection between this passage and the dream are the words ποταμιά, τιμονεύγει, and the last two verses with βάθος κυμάτων, ανάβαθα νερά, and the lack of fear. This could have been a possible explanation on the identity of the Savior, but I tend to agree with Perry, since the passage in this context shows that the river that the Rotokritos was trying to pass is about the love of Arethusa, and the ανάβαθα νερά, at this point, represent Arethusa's positive attitude towards him. In addition to that, the fact that the Rotokritos is able to sail, τιμονεύγει, is not what helps her, since in the dream, the one holding the stick is Arethusa herself, και το τιμόνι πιάνει, and she is saved only when fighting with the waves. But let us leave this point for now and get back to it in a bit. The next reference of Arethusa and dreaming comes in Book C from Phrosinis' mouth. It's a very well-known and discussed in bibliography point, also by Baker and Philippidi. Perry, specifically for this extract, has argued that the passage could be read as part of Phrosinis' effort to use Γιατριές as a last resort of psychotherapy in order to heal the heart of the young heroine. Such an argument seems valid, but what does this passage tell us in terms of attitudes towards dreaming? The choice of words is once more deliberate. Συν τα βυθό σε πάει το ριζικό σου, κι αν τύχει να φοβήθηκες και ο πίσω να γυρίσεις, συν τα πέλαγος βαθύ και θυμωμένο μπαίνεις, να αντριευτείς όσον μπορείς μόνια σου να βοηθήσεις. The connections with the dream of Arethusa, then, are obvious. These are just some of them. Therefore, we see that Nena wants Arethusa to have a dream in order for her to realize the difficulty of the situation. So the dream is somehow summoned by the philena of the heroine. The most interesting connection, though, between the dream and the romance is found in Book C, a couple of verses after Phrosinis' request. The older now Arethusa identifies herself with a ship, as Baker Philippidi have also mentioned, which is without sailors, alone in the Pelagos without any help, and is heading towards drowning. The connections are, of course, obvious, but I would like to focus on these 2 points. Ο σαν καράβιον δε βρεθεί στο πέλαγος, in the dream, σαν να τον μεσοπέλαγα σε ένα καράφι μοναχή, and the last one, και τρέχει πάντα στον πνημόν και τον πνημόν τσιφανερά στον ύπνο της εθώρη. Significantly, the last 2 lines have one important difference. In Book C, Arethusa feels like she is going towards drowning, τρέχει πάντα στον πνημόν, and this happens before she secretly forms a marriage with Rotokritos. Now, in Book D, after the marriage and her lover's exile, she is indeed drowning. Therefore, what precedes the dream not only offers the vocabulary and the imagery that the poet will use in constructing Arethusa's dream, but also shows the climactic and progressive journey of Arethusa in her amorous relationship with Rotokritos. Moreover, it demonstrates that Arethusa was aware of the possible consequences of her actions, which are manifested symbolically in her dream. At this point, let us now examine the importance of the dream narrative in the parts that follow it, starting by what the narrator has to say as a recapitulation of the dream and its discussion. He seems to focus on 2 quite opposite points. On the one hand, he somehow endorses the fact that the dream signifies κακομοιριές και πάθη, and on the other hand, he emphasizes on the view that one should not believe in dreams, forming another antithesis between Ephronymi, that laugh about dreams and don't believe in them, and Υπελελοί, who believe in them and do not listen. On Arethusa's part, the dream is clarified when she learns about the arrival of the 2 messengers from Byzantium and is consequently summoned by her father. Ανάθεμα το όνειρο σήμερο ξεδιαλύνει, για μένει τον ο ποταμός του ανέμου η κακοσύνη. One would expect that since the truth of the dream has been confirmed by the protagonist, and in that sense the readers, it would not come up again in the romance. But later, in Book D, we have an indirect reference to it by King Heracles, when he is trying to convince his daughter to accept to marry Christophoros, the prince of Byzantium. Among other things, he says, «Αν είδες όνειρον κακόν, άφιστο να περάσει. Γυχάνεις την τιμιώτη σου πριν πάρα να γεράσει». King Heracles provides perhaps the first adjective in the whole romance describing a dream, oniron kakon. What makes this reference interesting is the fact that, at least according to what we know so far, the father did not have the chance to learn that his daughter had a nightmare. His attitude towards dream is connected with the category of people that the narrator mentions a few lines above, Phronimus, and also comes in accordance to what Phrosini told Arethusa when trying to interpret the dream. Και τα ονειροφαντάσματα δύναμη είχαν τόση, τι ήξαζε το φτεξούσιον στον άνθρωπο και η γνώση, δεν είναι πάμε μελούμενα, μη δόνειρα έχουν χάρη, να φέρουσι τον άνθρωπο σε βάσανα και βάρη. Is this φτεξούσιον eliminated if someone believes in the dream? No. The dream itself and the outcome show us differently, since her free will and consequently her choice leads to the outcome that has been prophesied in the dream. This is clearly shown in Arethusa's last answer to her father, which I believe is strongly connected to the dream and might help us elucidate this issue a bit more. Τα ελόγιασα απολόγιασα τα ήθελα να δα πόδα, στο ζάλον όπου εστάθηκα πιο δεν σαλεύγω πόδα. Arethusa in this passage, after much thought, gives her final answer regarding την προξενιά and denies marrying the prince by declaring that στο ζάλον όπου εστάθηκα πιο δεν σαλεύγω πόδα. This image is closely connected with the one that ends her dream. Δεν ξεύροντας το ζάλο της εις ποια μέρα να ρίξει. Μην πάει να βρει βαθιά νερά και κινδυνεύσει πάλι. But also, this image, exactly the same image, while Arethusa in her dream did not know which side to choose, now after much thought, τα ελόγιασα απολόγιασα, makes her own decision, which will result into her imprisonment. This point, though, I believe connects Arethusa's dream and choice with the dream of Charydimos, since while he was trying to sleep, his spouse decided to test him and see which side he would choose to go. Ας μακρύνω και ασχωθώ εις τα κλαδιά στα δάση, κι ως αν ξυπνήσει θέλω δει τα ζάλα του που πάσει. Therefore, these three lines, θέλω δει τα ζάλα του που πάσει, δεν ξεύροντας ο ζάλο της εις ποια μέρα να ρίξει, στο ζάλον όπου εστάθηκα πιο δεν σαλεύγω πόδα, the connection between them, I think, should not be underestimated, and that they actually reinforce Holtussen's claim that the story of Charydimos is used here as a warning for the possible result of the love story of Eratokritos and Arethusa if they were to make the same wrong choices. Another connection between Charydimos' dream and Arethusa's is their reaction to the dream. Charydimos, they both react to the dream with fear. The similarity in the vocabulary of the two reactions is identical. Τρομάμενος με φόβον in the case of Charydimos, τρομάμενοι εφοβάτω, εδρόμαξον, etc. in the case of Arethusa. Both the mighty warrior and the princess share the same identical reaction to the dream. See especially the words τρομάμενος and τρομάμενοι. Moreover, they both seem to show a form of fear about the meaning of the dream. They both seem to believe that the dream is a bad omen. Again, the choice of words is identical. Δειλιά and mellete in the case of Charydimos, mellete and δειλιό in the case of Arethusa. In my opinion, the identical choice of words in the passages are not without meaning, but rather they link these two characters together. Regarding the end result, though, Arethusa has an indication of light in her own dream, μια λαμπυρότατη φωτιά, which advises her να μη φοβηθείς, to fear not, an important aspect for the outcome of her story. This point brings us back to an argument I made about the identity of the person that helps Arethusa in her dream. Who could it be? The obvious choice would be Eratokritos, with his impreza, as Baker and Philippides have argued. But the passage present in the end of the whole romance complicates things, at least in my understanding. The narrator, while describing the joy of the couple's marriage, writes the following, right before the revelation of the name of the author. «Εσήμωσε το ξύλο μου, το ράξιμο γυρεύγει, ήρθε σαν άβαθα νερά και πλειό δεν κινδυνεύγει. Κι σε λιμνιόν ανάπαυσης ήραξε το τιμόνι, σβαθή πελάγου αρμένη, ζαμαδάρθα στο λιμνιώνα, πιο δε θυμούμε ταραχές, μάνιτες και χειμώνα». Both Baker, Philippides and Beaton connect this passage to a medieval common literary topos, that of the self-referential rhetoric form. Seen as such, the metaphor here is used to describe the difficulties the poet had in writing his romance. The imagery of the sea is used both for the process of love and of writing. Becker and Philippides take this a step further by identifying in the passage both Eρωτokritos with Anάβαθα νερά and Arethusa with Vati Pelagou. However, I would argue that the passage has striking similarities with Arethusa's dream. The references to «Εσήμωσε το ξύλο μου, το ράξιμο γυρεύγει», «Ανάβαθα νερά», «Βάθη πελάγου», «Ήραξε το τιμόνι», etc. Therefore, if we accept the dream as an image of fiction, encapsulating in symbolic terms the love story of Arethusa and Eρωτokritos, could this passage be a metafictional comment on the poet's creation? Moreover, given the fact that we can identify the writer with the narrator, and, in effect, with the creator of this monde de rêve, could this concluding passage serve as an indirect response to the heroine's dream? And seen as such, is it possible, just say, is it possible, that the one giving help to Arethusa in her dream is the writer himself by composing for her a happy ending? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that effective juxtaposition, I think, in comparison of the two dreams, which certainly deserve to be looked at more closely together, as you have indeed done. I'm